Go ahead.
The beginning's always the worst.
I know, right? It's like so awkward.
I know.
Even when I'm just by myself in my own little studio, I'm like, all right, I can do this.
You got it.
It's going to be okay. This isn't weird. This isn't weird. Now
that we got that out of the way. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Rocky Road podcast. I am here with my friend Mandy, and we have a guest that we will introduce in just a moment. Before we start, I wanted to remind everybody that we have a lovely email address. Thank you, Gmail, therockyroadpod@gmail.com, and we would love to hear your story. We would love to hear anything you have to share. Tell me a really cool interaction you had in the grocery store with a stranger, or something that someone said that changed your day in a good way or a bad way. We'll keep them anonymous if you want. If you want us to share your name, we'll think about it. We also have an Instagram, the Rocky Road Pod, so visit us on there. We share a lot of silly content. We also share a lot of our links and information about our guests and some fun quotes, graphics. We just really want to build a nice community on there. So visit us there at the Rocky Road Pod. And without further ado, how you doing, Mandy?
I'm doing well today. How are you doing, Kristen?
I'm doing okay.
I know, what a great day. It's a beautiful day today. We are here with Michaela, and she's going to introduce herself and chat with us today for a little while. We're so excited to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Excited to be here.
And so tell us who you are. Tell us about yourself and what brought you here. To this point, I guess, because we asked you to come here.
Well, you did, Mandy.
An Instagram message. My name is Michaela Belle, and how much time do you have? Just kidding.
14-part episode.
I always say I'm a single mom to like the coolest, youngest preacher that you'll ever meet. My technical title, or what I have given myself, is I'm a learning experience designer, and pretty much is just a fancy way of saying I write curriculum and design online programs. And I do that for myself, and I also do it for other people as well. And I've been in business since 2020. Like so many people, I lost my job at the very beginning of COVID. And a lot of things happened. I was just getting ready to move into a house. Luckily, I was able to pull out of the contract of that house. So, like, thank God for the timing of that. But I moved into my parents', like, above my parents' garage, which felt awful as, like, a 34, almost 35-year-old single woman. But I told my dad, I said, I don't want to just get another job. I'm too old for this. And I took the outline of a book that I had started writing, and I created my first online course called The Savvy Single. I definitely have a heart for single women because I got married really young, and I didn't listen to my gut. I didn't read all of the signs, or I saw all the signs, but I didn't trust myself enough to know that they were signs.
Same.
Yeah, right? And so my heart and my passion is for teaching young single women some of the skills I wish that I would have had, and the knowledge that I wish I would have had. I created tools that I wish I would have had. So that's what the Savvy Single is. It's really like a holistic program for women to just learn about all the different parts of them, so that it doesn't matter what their relationship status is, that they can stand on the ground of who they are. The funny thing is, like, 2/3 of my students are married. So I'm getting ready to change the name.
Oh, boy.
I'm getting ready to change the name of the program to the Savvy Journey.
There you go.
Oh, cool.
And then I've developed quite a few other programs from there. There's a life group curriculum for churches and colleges that's in there. Tons and tons of workshops at this point. And I'm developing my first male program right now coming up, so that we can help single men develop emotional intelligence themselves.
There you go.
What a concept, right?
So I'm so curious about how most of the women are married. I was going to ask before you said that, do you think that women that are younger are seeking out this curriculum, or is it after something has happened, them saying, oh, I need to reset and focus more on myself?
Yeah, so I'm kind of finding two different like the younger women, I don't know why. I feel like younger women have always been like attracted to me, and it's maybe feels more like a mentor, kind of big sister. Like I feel like I'm a professional big sister sometimes.
That's your other title.
That's my other title, So that, and I think just too, because I have such a heart for that generation. And because I'm 9, almost 10 years older than my little sister. So I've always kind of been around that age group as well. So they're definitely attracted to it, but more so the life group curriculum, because it's significantly less expensive. The Savvy is a higher price point. It's a little over $2,000 per person to go through that, because it's a full coaching program. But then the other people that are either divorced or they're kind of like going through something in their life are also attracted to it. But it's been so interesting, because I do have a lot of women who, like, they're happily married, but they really never took that time to discover who they truly are, or to grow and develop, like, emotionally, spiritually, relationally. So I think some of the women that are a little bit more mature than me, that generation is kind of stuck in the middle of, they're not our parents' generation that didn't look at emotional intelligence at all.
Right.
But they're also not our generation that's significantly more exposed to that. They're like caught in the middle. So that's kind of what I'm finding, is a very wide range of people.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it really is. But yeah, so the Savvy started, and then I started developing other programs. Then I started working with other people to develop curriculum. People were just seeing things on Instagram of, how do you do that? Like, how did you create a course, and how did you film? And so I've become involved in like a couple companies and helping them with the development of their online experiences.
All of your work is so creative too, and it's so
thank
pretty,
you.
and it's all like, it just looks so nice. So yeah, I mean, you do a great job, so it would make sense why people would ask you how you did it too. So
I love design. I'm not a graphic designer, but I like, even the graphic designer that I do have, I draw everything out. Like, I'm like, this is exactly what I want this page to look like. So I'm
like, okay, so do it yourself.
Literally, she's so patient with me. She's so lovely. And because I probably drive her insane. But I have that mind of, like, I do love design, and I love all things pretty. Like, if you're going to have a journal or a workbook, it's better if it's pretty, because then you want to go to it. At least that's how it is in my head.
But even just your handwriting is beautiful. Like, when I see it on Instagram, I'm like, man, my handwriting looks so bad compared to this. And there's just this beautiful cursive, and I'm like, is that real? Because I don't know.
My mom is an artist.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up with a very artistic mom. I actually did not think I was creative at all. And even, I also was terrified of public speaking. I almost failed my public speaking class, and I was a straight A student my entire life. But public speaking, scared the crap out of me.
Which is interesting, because the first time I ever saw you, you had a microphone in your hand.
Yeah. Well, now it's like what I do for a living. I mean, a large majority of my income is from the speaking side of my business. But which is why I tell people all the time, like, sometimes your greatest gift is wrapped in your biggest insecurity. And I just think, so, like, look into the things that scare you the most, because sometimes your gift is actually
In there.
all up in there.
Just hidden.
So take us through just briefly how you got to being where you are now. So you said you were divorced, you're a single mom, kind of.
Yeah.
But like, take us just through, like, I don't know, a couple minutes of what brought you to that point from where you started when you were, let's say, 20, and then like through that journey. I've talked to you before too, and I think we have a lot of similarities.
Yes, we do.
So just tell us kind of about that, so people know, like, how you got to where you are, and and that you are worth listening to.
Sweet, thanks. Yeah, so I mean, I graduated college, and about a little over a week later, I was married. So I feel like I went, like, I took off my gown, or what is it? Your
graduation.
Your graduation
robe.
Yeah, what's it called though?
Cap and gown. It's a cap and gown.
Yeah. From one gown to the next.
There it is. We got there together.
Yeah. So I got married very quickly, and like I mentioned earlier, I saw all the red flags of abuse, but I didn't see them as abuse because I didn't I only thought abuse was hitting somebody, like physical abuse. I didn't know anything about verbal or emotional abuse at that time. But what I did know was like something felt off about him, and even the way that he treated me or talked about women was another really big thing I noticed. But anyways, I thought there was a timeline that you were supposed to follow in life. And I don't know if it's that I'm the oldest, and like the oldest kind of like follows the rules. But I'm like, you get married after college. And so that's just kind of like, I was following
same thing,
what I thought I was supposed to do. And he was a really strong Christian. I met him in church. He was one of the 5 people that like planted the church. So I thought I was golden. And then, and for the type of abuse that I experienced, it was really more so just being put down all the time. And so I really became like, my mom described me as a shell of Michaela, like as I was going through my divorce, because I was terrified to make any decisions. I was so insecure, you guys. Like I was so fragile. And I'm not a fragile woman, but I was fragile at that point in time. And there was one moment when I realized for the first time that it was abuse. And it was, I won't go through the whole story, but it was a Saturday morning. I had just made him breakfast in bed. And he told me when he came into the kitchen, like when I was cleaning up, just don't spill the bacon grease. It's like so random. I was like, okay. And of course, I freaking tripped on the rug in the kitchen and I spilled the bacon grease on the floor. And so I started cleaning it up. Like I was on my knees cleaning it up. And I'm like, oh, I just pray that he did not hear that. And the next thing I know, I see his like feet. So I'm on my knees, and so he's standing over top of me, and he's like, "You're such a dumb broad." And it wasn't even like the meanest thing that he said to me, but it was the first time that I caught my own thinking, and I heard, it was as if it was like loud. My thoughts were loud, and I said to myself, "He's right. You're so stupid. You can't even like clean up the way that you want him to." And that was the first time that I experienced the presence of God, because it felt like somebody walked into the room. You know how when someone's behind you, like you know it, you don't have to see them, but that was the first time that I met God, because I felt like he came into the room. It felt as though somebody lifted, like physically lifted my chin and spoke to my soul like, no, you are smart and you are kind and you're all the, like, it was just like somebody was speaking life into me and told me to stand up and turn around. And that was, my daughter was like 9 months old at that time. And when I stood up and I turned around, I met my eyes with hers. And that was when I knew I had to leave, because I looked at her and I'm like, confident women raise confident children. I can't give my daughter something that I don't have. And I will never have that here. And we had gone through, at that point in time, we had been in therapy for 1.5 years. It's not like I hadn't tried as much as I possibly could. So that was like the moment where I knew. So we went through divorce when she was 1. So I've been on my own with her since I was 27. And it's just always been a really long process. I would love to say it was rainbows and butterflies after, but I started dating right away. And that's when I realized, like, you repeat what you don't repair. And so I was in that relationship for like 3 years, and it broke me, because it was the same abuse. It was just the same cycle over again. So that was when I took a season to repair. Like, I felt like I was called to a season of stillness, and I did not know what that meant. I've never been still before in that way. So in those 2.5 years, I learned a lot of things. Like, I went to therapy, I got a life coach, I started journaling, and I learned how to do meditation and breath work. Those are like my 4 puzzle pieces of healing. I think sometimes we think like, oh, I'm just going to go to therapy and that's going to fix everything. Therapy was crucial for me, but it was not everything for me. I needed the other components. So with all of that, those 2.5 years is really when I started developing emotional intelligence. I started learning about communication skills. I started learning about what boundaries were. Like, whoa,
what a girl.
Whoa,
still learning.
Yeah, I learned about my mother wounds, like things that I didn't like. Who would have thought that your relationship with your mom had anything to do with how you were going to show up in relationships romantically. So I was learning all of these things. And I had a couch and wine moment like 2.5 years after my healing journey. It was a Friday after I dropped Malin off to her dad's. And I sat on the couch. I had made myself dinner, sat on the couch. I had a glass of wine in my hand. And I was like, what is this feeling? Like what? Like I could sense like a new feeling in my body, like a new emotion. And as you grow in your emotional intelligence, you start to notice feelings and like how it responds, how your body responds to it. So I was like, what is this? And I sat with it for a little bit. I was like, oh my gosh, this is peace. This is like contentness. This is joy. I don't think I've ever experienced this feeling before because it felt so new. And that was when I thought to myself, how do I help women get here? My life wasn't perfect. I was not in like the best job in the world. I didn't live in the area that I wanted to live in. My ex-husband was still, can you curse on this thing? You probably can't.
Sure, say whatever you want to.
Still an asshole, like still the same person. Like nothing in my life necessarily changed, but I did. My internal makeup changed. Therefore, my external world didn't need to. So that's why I started writing the book, which then became The Savvy Single. So essentially everything that I wish, like all the different ways that I struggled to like figure out everything, I wanted to remove some of the struggle and the guesswork out of healing. So that's kind of why I ended up. That was sort of long. Sorry, guys.
No, it's perfect.
Okay. It's great.
Yeah.
I think too, because you talk about emotional intelligence and you had brought this up earlier, and it's a hard thing with our generation because I think people think that teenage years you're crazy and your emotions are crazy, but I still think your 20s are too.
Oh my gosh.
Sure.
So it's like because for me, like I think your teenage years, you're still at home, like you're still protected by your parents, you know, more or less. And then like your 20s, you're finally out in the middle of nowhere. Like your life has started. You are an adult and you have no idea who you are. And for me, I went to college and I was similar. I got married a year after I graduated, but I was engaged when I graduated. And then, you know, I went through college, which is still kind of like that in between stage. You're really not in real life yet, but you're still kind of there. And
but
then
there's also the expectation that you're in college, you're going to act like an adult.
Right.
And you're going to have these adult expectations of yourself and this processing that, okay, we're thinking long term. No, I'm thinking about how I'm going to get to midterms and then how I'm going to get to break. And then if I have to have a job over the summer, you're not thinking about your 5-year plan, even if you're a sophomore, junior, maybe when you're a senior, if that starts.
And people put expectations on you that you are an adult and you should have it figured out.
Exactly.
So you should be 21 and know who you are. You're an adult now. And my 20s was an emotional disaster. I learned so much about myself in my 20s, way more than I learned about myself in my teens. You're still maturing and growing as a teenager. You're still in school full time, graduating high school, you know, high school drama, all of that. And then it's like the 20s hit and people think you have to have it figured out. And my gosh, did I not?
I know. And you're not, I think we have this idea like that we're behind in life. Like everyone I feel like is hurrying to not be so behind. And I think if we just relaxed for a little bit, knowing that we're not behind in life and that my journey and like all 3 of us that are at this table, we're different human beings. We have different gifts. We have different purposes. Therefore, our timeline and our journey is going to look so different. And that's okay. And it should. And even something like when to have kids and when to get married and all of that. And I know that's how I was too. I was like you. I'm graduated. I have to get married. So I have a boyfriend. I'm going to marry him. And so he did that. And then like I had a baby at 25. And now I'm like, people are, you know, I was talking to one of Reagan's friend's parents and she's like, yeah, I had my kid when I was 33. And I'm like, wow, in my head, that was so old to have kids, you know? I know.
But it's not.
I know.
So when you're in your 20s, I'm like, oh, I have to have all of my kids before I'm 30 in order to be a young parent.
Yeah, keep telling me it's not too old to have kids.
I know.
Quell this anxiety I have, please.
But like, it's not. I mean, I don't want to be 45 and having a kid, but some people do. I mean, it's not completely unheard of. So it's just trying to figure out who you are first. It's so important in the journey.
It really is. And we're not given spaces. Like there's no class in college like find yourself 101.
Yeah,
but I think there
seriously.
should be. I've literally said, I want to write the curriculum.
Find yourself 101. And then be yourself 102.
Yeah. Yes. It's so true.
I mean, even through college, I never learned how to write a check, but I had to, I barely passed this one. It wasn't like an English class, but it was some kind of writing literature class, and I hated it. I learned absolutely nothing from that class. Like, why did I spend the money in college to go through this class where something like that, where learning how to be yourself, emotional intelligence, how to be okay with being yourself. And I had to learn that too in a season of singleness for myself. Like, now I had to learn how to be okay being single. And that it's not the end of the world, and it's not a waiting.
Correct.
It's like you can be there and be present, and you're not in this season waiting for your next husband. It's like, no.
That was a great noise. I really appreciated that passion there.
Let's dive into that noise.
Well, even thinking, so I when I came back up here, I was convinced. I was like, I'm going to be single for like a year and a half. Like, I had a plan. I was like, ward off all men. I hate them. They're all, and I hate them. Men aren't, I'm not going to demonize men. But I just was very much in a spot where I was like, I'm going to focus on me. So I got myself a nice little apartment. I got myself a new job. I did all this. I was really excited. And then wham, a month into my new job, my fiance walks in the door. And I'm like, you're cute, but I'm focusing on me.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting, I felt like I wasn't being true to myself when I was attracted to him and I wanted to talk to him. I was like, no, this is about you. You stop. And I quite literally told him to go away for a while.
Yeah.
And he was a good friend, and he, working together every single day, obviously builds that relationship
For sure.
so much quicker than a normal relationship where we see each other once a week. I saw him for multiple hours every single day.
Yeah.
And so when I finally said yes to, like, he's like, he was trying so hard. I bless
so
his
cute.
heart. Love him so much. When I finally said yes to him to go, like, to a winery somewhere, and just let myself settle and say, just see what he wants, see what he has to offer. And he was so sweet. And he came to me in moments that I really needed a friend, and he was a friend.
Yeah.
I finally said, okay, you wanted to wait, but you don't have to.
Yes.
And it was 4 months after I moved here that I was in a committed relationship with him. And that blows my mind because I didn't want it. And it's that whole, when you least expect it.
Yep.
Kind of.
Yep.
I don't like stereotypical things like that. But it quite literally was, I didn't even want it, and I didn't expect it. And so can you speak kind of to timelines in that sense of when are you being too stubborn to follow your own heart versus committing to space for yourself?
That's a really good question. I think it comes back to what you, like, listening and learning how to trust that internal voice. Because you were interested, like, but you were pushing that voice away. So we can push the voice away in multiple different ways. And it can be when you're ready. And even when you know you're not, or you're seeing signs in other people. So I think as far as like timelines, it's trusting yourself and really getting to know that internal voice. And also looking at the person's character. If we're specifically talking about dating, one of the things I talk about all the time, just to single women in general, is to know your values so that you can date from a value perspective. Values and morals are two different things. You can have the same moral compass, but not have the same values. And I see a lot of Christians do this, where they think, oh, morally they're the same. Oh, he goes to church. And my thing is always like, and? Like, tell me about his values, and like, what does he like to do? What about his friend group? Like, so
how does he treat his mom?
How does he treat how does he treat anybody? Literally, like, how does he treat the waitress or the person that quote unquote like doesn't necessarily matter to him, like someone who's quote unquote below him.
Right.
Notice how they treat everyone. But I think it's that learning how to trust yourself and getting to know your own voice is like the biggest thing, because everyone's timeline is going to be different. I sat in my singleness, like really committed to stillness for 2.5 years. And I didn't want to be there for 2.5 years. If I'm honest, I was like, Lord, actually my dog that I got, who's about to be a year old, I got him. I told my dad, I was like, Dad, I'm just going to be alone the rest of my life, and I'm getting a damn dog. And I got the dog, and 2 weeks later I started dating the guy that I'm for sure marrying.
So we'd like to thank Bert.
Yeah.
Bert the dog years ago.
I know, right? I should have gotten a dog a long time ago. No, but the crazy thing is, too, when I think about my current relationship, and I look at his life, the timeline of his life, I could not have met him any earlier. Mm-hmm. He also wasn't ready for me. So, like, learning how to trust the entire process and, like, just the journey of it all.
And not rushing it.
Yeah. And just staying, like, learning how to be content. Because I think we live in a world where we're taught that being content is bad. It means that you're, like, not moving, or that you're, what's the word I'm looking for? Stagnant or but like true contentness is just a full like embrace of where you are, which is why I have one of my programs is called Own Your Now. I just don't think that we're ever in the now, and I don't think that you can be invited to your next until you embrace your right now and like enjoy it. So,
and I think you've said this too you said this earlier a little while ago, where your circumstances don't need to be perfect for you to be content.
100%.
And I've run into that a lot more recently, that people are really confused about that. When you're okay, you're peaceful.
Yeah.
It's okay. Like but your circumstances around you are crazy. Yes. Or, I'm a single mom too. So it's like my life is crazy, and people look at me like, are you okay? Yeah. I'm okay.
I know.
And they're shocked by that. They're like, you shouldn't be, it's like, it shouldn't be okay for you
I know.
to go through what you're going through, or to have to do what you're doing, or live this life. And, even for me, like, I was talking to Kristen earlier today about co-parenting and how far we've come in our journey of co-parenting in almost, it's like 3.5 years now. And in that, and people are shocked when they find out that we get along and we're friends. Yeah. And it's like, don't be so surprised by it. It's okay. Yeah. I'm okay. I can have a crazy life around me and live this life and still be okay.
But if you also took a tiny little glimpse of how you were a couple years ago and a tiny little glimpse of how you are now, people don't see the immense amount of work that went into it.
Correct. Yeah. That part.
Yeah.
Because most people don't do the work. And that's
just expect that.
Yeah. And you have to do that internal work. I always say, so I started this probably 2 or 3 years ago now, where at the beginning of fall, I just like take a look at myself in the mirror and I say, okay, what is one area like internally that sister's got to work on a little bit? And I invest money and time into that one specific internal skill. So that way, when you start the new year and you like set goals, and you're like, new year, new you. It's like, well, it's not really new you, because you're still exactly the same.
Stupidest time for goals too.
It's so dumb. Yeah.
That's the worst.
I actually do all my goal setting, quote unquote, for the year my birthday. So every October 27th, I just like set my new year goals, because it's my birth year.
Yeah. Our birthdays are a day apart.
Should we release this on your birthday?
Oh my gosh, that'd be so
great idea. Happy birthday.
Are you the 26th or the 28th?
I'm the 28th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, so that's when I do my new year goals. But I always like work on the last couple months of the year, working internally on myself. And it has changed my world to one, we don't grow internally, but then we also don't focus on one thing very often. So my one thing right now is presence. Because a couple of years ago, if you would have met me, you'd be like, you are a squirrel in human form. Like anything shiny, I'm like, ooh, ooh, ooh. Like I was all over the place. So and I've grown a lot.
Definitely tell when you're talking to somebody and they're not there.
Yes.
And they're like looking right through you. I specifically can think of one person that I remember talking to, and he was never there. Like he was always thinking of something else. And I was like, are you listening to me?
Yeah.
Are you paying attention to me?
Most people aren't. Like even when people are starting to date, like they're thinking of how they're going to be witty in their response. So they're not even listening to the other person. But so one of my things is because my daughter called me out on it a couple months ago. She's like, Mom, I feel like you're not here. I'm like, you're right. because I'm thinking about 7 million things right now.
Right.
So that's like the skill that I'm working on right now, is learning how to be more present. And it is a skill. Actually, I'm doing an online conference right now. It's called The Pieces of Peace. And today's day one. And I called it Jordan Presence. Have you guys seen that docuseries on Netflix, The Last Dance? It follows Michael Jordan's career and like the Chicago Bulls. Oh. It is so good. But there's this one line in it where the commentator said, Michael's gift is not that he can run fast, jump high, or shoot a basketball. It's that he is completely present. And that was his separator. And I literally, when I was listening to that, I made Ryan, I'm like, rewind that. And I listened to it a couple times, and I thought, that is fascinating to me. And then I rewatched the series to figure out, what did he do that like helps him be that present? But I think in today's culture, like, we're literally wired for distraction. Like, our phones know exactly how to distract us and how to make us addicted to it, and we are. Like, when you look at how the number of hours that people spend on social media or like bouncing between activities, we're very rarely where we are.
And then we wonder why we have such short attention spans.
Oh my gosh.
I think it's the bouncing that's the most dangerous, because they're like, I will batch my emails. I will be on email for 3 hours straight, and then I will close it, and I won't get notifications on my phone for emails, because I've been at jobs where I could sit there all day long and just be answering emails all day long, because one person might be at their desk and we'll bounce back and forth, but no, it gets turned off at this time. And I'm going to go do something else, because I'll be batty if I'm on a computer all day. But even like, for example, like social media marketing, you can't be bouncing back and forth between all these things. You can get some really focused work done in an hour if you stay there for an hour, and that's your 1 hour on that platform that day. And it's even in kids, like I have a couple of friends who have very young children, looking at certain shows that they're really gravitated to. It's all so fast. So fast. So colorful, and so loud. And I'm not gonna talk about the specific one that uses the same 3 songs with different words on every single episode. But y'all know what I'm talking about. And it's just, I look at it and I go, I am even entranced. And this tiny little brain is being wired to focus on 27 things at once.
Even I look at Malin sometimes, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's all over the place. And that's not really going to improve if I don't. That's the craziest thing about being a parent. Like, even I have friends of mine who are very emotionally intelligent, and honestly, it comes easy for them because their parents are very emotionally intelligent. And emotional intelligence and emotional regulation, I think we often have the wrong definition of that. It pretty much just means that you are able to manage your emotions and your feelings well. Your emotions are the chemical releases in your body that cause a state. It's like sadness. Your feelings are your reactions to your emotional state. So most people's reactions are all crazy and all over the place, and we have no control over them. So emotional intelligence is where you have that. But so people that have it a little bit more naturally have it because their parents have it, because it was modeled for them. So I think too, that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about teaching single women some of these things so they develop skills before they ever have children. So it's just a part of their being. Right. And then their kids will be able to have it a lot easier. Because I grew up with just some things. My childhood was lovely. But like my primary caregiver, all over the place. Her emotions still are all over the place. Really, really poor relational or reactionary skills.
Which is, and I'm so glad you said that, because I was just talking about this the other day, to just back up a little bit. I had a great childhood. And you don't realize what you need to work through because you have a good childhood. Like, it still brings things you need to work on, you know, expectations and approval, and like things that I'm learning now at 30. And I'm like, how could I have had these issues? I had a great childhood.
I know.
And then now I'm unpacking all of it and relearning and working through a good childhood, let alone people that have traumatic childhoods. I
know.
So it's like, you know, I'm glad you said that, because I don't feel so alone. Sometimes it's like, I feel like I'm bragging when I say I had a great childhood, I have great parents, which I did. But now I have to unlearn so many things that were, quote, well taught to me. Because there's emotional intelligence involved.
Correct.
Or I am a different person. You know, I think for me, like looking at my parents, they were great people. I wanted to be exactly like them.
Yeah.
But generationally, it's so different now. So you have to like undo what you learned and redo it to work for who you are. So that's, my gosh, I'm so glad you said that. Like, it's so validating.
Well, we speak about that. I think we said that a couple times where even in both of our episodes, we're like, there's nothing wrong with my childhood. Like nothing happened. But it's a very relatable thing to say, well, I had a good childhood. Okay, great. So let's still talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's still go into that.
And you think a good childhood leads to a good adulthood.
Yeah.
And it's like, I had a great childhood and I was divorced and a single mom by 28.
Yep, for sure.
So it's very different. But you said your mom was kind of, or what I'm guessing, like your mom was kind of all over.
Yeah. And like in not in ways, like if you would meet her, like you would not think that way. But even certain things like, anytime I would come to her with any quote unquote negative emotion, I was always told, you can't think that way. You have to be positive.
Yeah.
You just need to be positive, Michaela. Or you have to be, are you not grateful? You have to be grateful. You have to think about all the things that you do have. And so what I learned as a really young kid was to suppress a lot of my emotions and feel shame and guilt around them. And what does that lead to as an adult? Is it leads to somebody who doesn't trust their own emotions. So, and I had to really work through this in therapy because there was a little bit of time where I was angry with my mom. And I think one of the things that I've had to learn how to do pretty recently was to understand and to heal from this picture, this idea that I had of my mom and I's relationship, like who I want her to be. I had to mourn that I don't have that and that it's okay. Like my mom is a beautiful person and there are so many incredible things about her. But I did have to heal from the wounds that I had, and not that she was like doing things wrong at all. And I think too, like as parents, we can feel so guilty. But I was talking to a few of my friends the other day. I'm like, we should have journals, because the other day I blew up at Malin for something. And I had to apologize to her for it. But I'm like, I'm going to write this one down. Like, okay, this day I did this to her. I said this. I'm going to give it to her therapist one day. Be like, these are all, here's all the stuff you're going to need to work through.
Actually an amazing.
Isn't it kind of a brilliant idea? But yeah, I mean, you're going to mess up your kids no matter what.
Yeah.
But the fact that you're aware of that makes you so much more equipped to be aware of like these little tiny things. Whereas there are some parents who have no idea that what they just did was inappropriate and they refuse to apologize.
Yeah.
And it's like that one statement or that one episode can impact them forever.
Oh my gosh.
So for me, I'm like, all right, I'm going to do the best I can. I know I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to mess it up. And then when she's 20, I'm going to be like, let me pay for 5 years of therapy for you to undo everything that I've put in you that is not right.
I would start it earlier. I had an episode when I was a teenager and the doctor in the hospital was... talk about one sentence that'll change your life is he looked at my mom and he goes, because she was just very upset with what happened and like what happened, how did she, it was a very mild suicide attempt, just not to drop that in here, but I was like, I'm being vague, but it would not have killed me, but I didn't know that because I was 13. So she was just sitting there so upset, and the doctor looked at her and goes, every 13-year-old girl needs therapy. And it's true. Every single pre-ad and adolescent person need that support. They just don't know it.
For sure.
So let's just include that in high school curriculum, please.
Oh my gosh, that'd be so great.
God.
Malin, we're actually working on Malin's first course. Malin, my daughter is 11 right now. It's called Divorce Kids Talk. And it's essentially her version of therapy for kids from a kid. And it's specifically for kids whose parents are either going through a divorce or new to divorce or like never really went to therapy. And it's her version, but we are having it gone through, like all my therapist friends are looking at the curriculum before it ever goes anywhere. But when she was, I think 7, because her and I have a very open, we talk a lot. And we talk a lot about feelings and emotions, and she always has a safe place to talk to me about those things. But there was one day she was 7. She came home from her dad. She's like, so I think it's about time for that therapy.
Oh my God.
Can we have her on, please?
You should. You really should. She's had 2 episodes on my podcast, and they are by far the most downloaded.
Yeah. I see like little glimpses of her, but it's so cool to see a kid who is just that convicted and like, this is.
Can we just talk about that therapy?
Yeah.
Can you just like put me in it?
Yeah. And so we did. Like we started her in therapy when she was 7. But even, the example of, I think it was yesterday or the day before, I did not emotionally regulate very well. And I blew up at her and I said something to her that I knew was like a little seed. And if I let it sit in there for too long, it would water. And so I went to her and I said, I just wanted to apologize. This is what mommy said. You are not responsible for my reaction to something. Let's talk about how it made you feel when I said this. And so she was able to, like, in that moment, and my prayer is that it didn't seep into it. So yeah, and again, like, I'm not the perfect parent, but I will always apologize and tell Malin when I've done something wrong, because I kind of wish that would have been done for me.
And I think too, even you saying that it's okay, like you expecting her to go to therapy to undo the mess ups you put in her is like by far a huge step, because I think we can, and as me, I have a 5-year-old, so she's not like really, I mean, she could do therapy or whatever, but she doesn't really need to right now. But it's like when she's older, to have that emotional intelligence to say, hey, it's okay to go to therapy. Like I didn't destroy you as a person. I think we can so quickly feel like failures as parents when our kids are hurting or broken or something is bothering them. And for you getting divorced when she was little, for me, I got divorced, she was 2. So she has no memories of us together, but she sees pictures of us together and whatever. And so it's, we have that. And then, but for her, it's like, she has to kind of deal with the repercussions of what happened between her dad and I. And I have to just allow that to happen. So if she grows up and she's like struggling with abandonment or with like an emotional issue that's like an attachment to what happened, I have to be okay and know that I didn't fail her.
Correct.
By letting her go to therapy and talking it out and learning to heal herself from, we're not perfect people.
Correct.
And our spouses are the same way, like dating, not engaged, not single, whatever it is. It's like every person in your sphere can be impacted by what you say. And
100%.
It's okay if your spouse needs to go to therapy or if you need to go to therapy. It's okay to do that and take care of yourself.
I think everyone should be in therapy. I'm not going to lie.
I agree. It's amazing.
Agreed.
Kristen's like partially my second therapist, but like I go to it too. And it's like, it's amazing having the same person there in your corner weekly. You can depend on it. You know, they're there. They're there to help you. That is their job. They are not there to condemn you or to make you feel stupid or to make you feel less worthy. Like they are in your corner.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. I highly recommend it.
Little plug that you don't have to like the first therapist you see. And if it's not a great relationship, go find yourself a new one.
It's like dating. Like you don't have to
say
marry
that all the time.
the first guy that you go on a date with. Like figure it out.
Gosh, could you imagine the
If it's
world
not
if
a
we
good
did that?
connection.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
terrible.
Move on.
My
Yeah.
God.
No, thank you.
And we often think of therapy as like the last resort, but if you make it one of the closer couple steps, it will help everything. Like therapy still has a negative connotation, I think, but it is so good for you. And when I added like therapy and then I added a life coach, I didn't know what a life coach was. And this was a long time ago. Now I feel like it's more, people talk about life coaches a little bit more, but I didn't really know what it was. And it was $4,000 for like, I think it was 12 weeks. And I was a single mom. I mean, I was selling stuff just to to hire this guy. But he literally changed my entire life because my therapy was helping me figure out some stuff in my past.
Right.
And then my coach was helping me in the now and in the future, like really coaching me through some, okay, as you're healing, we still got to keep moving forward too.
Yeah.
So I think everyone's puzzle pieces are a little bit different. It might not be a coach for you, but it could be a course on something or like learning how to journal or learning how to meditate. Like there's so many different components to growing and healing.
And things like, not to interrupt you, but like journaling, meditating, breathing don't cost money.
Correct.
But they can be so helpful. So even if you are a single parent or you are living very closely or paycheck to paycheck, there's other ways of healing and working towards
100%.
healing that don't cost money.
Yes. And nowadays there's a lot more options when it comes to therapy that are more and more affordable, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things, I think you've said this, and I've always remembered it from the time I heard you say it, was that that people say time heals all wounds, and you always say time well spent heals all wounds. How did you come up with that? Because I remember you saying that years ago, I think, and that has always stuck with me because, again, like you said, Kristen, from where I was a few years ago to where I am now, so different. And people that don't know me don't know that journey. But it is vastly different. And, you know, I was talking about this a little bit ago, like it is really frustrating to run into people that expect you to still be broken years later. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of was thinking through that process as far as like that specific quote came from a lot of coaching women of saying like, well, I mean, I've been single for a year. Well, yeah, but what did you do in that year? Because if you didn't do anything to heal, you're still in the same position emotionally, spiritually, like you're still in the same mindset. So I think it's more so like somebody could not do anything for a year and another person could do a lot with their year, same time, but they're ready for the next thing, whereas the other person isn't, even though they both took a year off of dating, quote unquote. So like
that could
that's
go back to your 4 months too. Like if you spent 4 months of really getting yourself together, 4 months can seem so short, but it can also, but if you were really intentional about it, and it's not like for you, Kristen, it's not like you met Cody and you stopped healing. You know, it's like, I met somebody, chapter's closed, I'm never going to go back to it.
Right. In fact, we healed together about a lot of things too. We've talked about that personally. Just I'm thinking about the time that I was emotionally void from my previous relationship and then having one of those light bulb moments and saying, oh yeah, it's time.
Yeah.
And I had known it for probably, how long were we together? 4 years?
Yeah.
And I just didn't let myself know it. And so thinking about the time, I just was able to expedite myself out of that scenario. And that even just being able to, I swear, more healing happened in my drive from North Carolina to PA than in the years prior ever. And that was a 10-hour drive. And just like...
Yeah. Because you probably had the space to be present with yourself. Because it's really easy when life just goes on and, you know, days like flow into one another where we don't really have that time to just like tune the world out and take 10 hours to be with yourself and process through things. Like that's so healthy. And if you can do that daily, like I try to do it daily of just having that present time with myself, with Malin, with Ryan, with the Lord, like all of those things. Because even like right now, I have had the craziest last couple of months. Like most people have no idea. There's been health issues that I've been dealing with, surgeries, like things that people have no idea that I've been going through, like a lot of chaos externally. But I texted Ryan last night, like, I've also never had so much peace as I do right now. It's like, it still doesn't make sense, but I still have it.
I keep thinking of that lyric from Firm Foundation where I've still got joy in chaos. I've got peace that makes no sense. And that just, it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. But if it makes sense to you, you are thriving in that moment and saying, I'm good.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like it, doesn't look like it. But you can just rest in that.
Yeah. Even like my tattoo, it says, "It is well with my soul," my favorite hymn. Even the author of that, the writer of that song, like what he was going through, if you read about it, it is insane. He lost like everything.
4 daughters and his wife.
4 daughters and his wife. And like he wrote, "It is well with my soul." Like during...
They died like on a ship, right? I think I think that's what it is.
Wasn't he on the ship when he wrote it or something? No, yeah, maybe they did die on the ship. Yeah.
The ship sank or something.
Yes.
And he
Yeah,
lost
yeah.
all of it. Yeah, something crazy like that.
Yeah. There was just a lot of loss in his life, but he wrote that hymn in that time of his.
It's interesting that you brought up Michael Jordan too, because his story is wild. Like with what happened to his dad, and like I think his last game was on Father's Day, right after his dad was.
Yes.
Oh, it's just.
And they showed in the docuseries is so good. I'm obsessed with it. I think everyone should watch it.
I wrote it down. I'm going to watch it.
It's so good. But they showed footage of him after that game, and he was curled up, like on the floor in the locker room, sobbing, like uncontrollably sobbing. And one thing I think too is really beautiful about that, I think it's helpful for men to see that, like someone like Michael Jordan on the floor bawling his eyes out. Emotions are human nature, not just women.
And every single person has them.
Every single person has them. We all react to them differently, and we also have a lot of like cultural and like societal things around emotions.
And also emotions start the moment you're born.
Yes.
You don't develop them. You have them.
Yes. Yeah, it's a natural
and you
part.
have them until you die.
Yes.
Forever.
For sure. But men need to be able to have like that understanding of like, I can cry. Like it's healthy. It's a healthy release to cry. They actually say that when you cry, like you release stress hormones or something like that. Like where it really is like something helpful. But yeah, that was like a beautiful, I mean, I was a mess watching that. But yeah, such a beautiful example of pure emotion.
So when people say that, I'm thinking when people are like, oh, that's an overly emotional person. Like, how do you handle that? Somebody that just cries all the time, or is, I guess would it be like emotionally unintelligent when they can't regulate it, and it's just like somebody says something to you and you start sobbing, or you're something said and you're sparking anger, and
yeah, they would be probably dysregulated often and not know how to regulate themselves. Which I would say you need day 2 of the Pieces of Peace for sure. But
link in bio.
But yeah, I think it's okay to be sensitive, and I think that's the difference. Is like some people are more sensitive to their emotions, and also women. There's one lesson in the Savvy where I talk about, as women, all the 4 phases of our cycle, and your hormones. Do you guys know about your phases? Okay. So like in every phase of your cycle, your hormones are at different levels. So there's a week where you are significant, like your brain is wired for detailed work in those specific days. And then the following week is when you're not, like you like. So that's why as women, sometimes it's like, why did I want to organize everything the last couple of days? And now I can't even concentrate for a hot second.
Wow.
A lot of it has to do with your hormone levels and all that kind of stuff. So it's knowledge first. And that will help you to have grace with yourself too.
I know some people that plan their month calendar based on their cycle.
I literally do.
I think I need to do that now
when you're
that I know this.
Yeah. And it helps them because they're like, oh, these days I'm going to be more tired. So I'm going to purposefully not schedule crazy things on these days because I'm going to be a little, I know people that do that.
In your ovulation, I know, in your ovulation phase, like you literally, like you are a better speaker because that's the time when your brain is both sides of your brain are the most connected. You also are like, people are more attracted to you, even just energy wise. So there's all these crazy things when it comes to it. So first, like having knowledge, especially if you're a woman, of all of your cycles is just important. But some people are naturally more sensitive. I don't know if you guys know much about Enneagram stuff, but like Enneagram 4s, like they're very, very in touch with their emotions. And they do tend to be people who are emotionally dysregulated more often than not, if they haven't developed that skill. So it's okay to be sensitive, but if your emotions are ever flooding you, or the opposite, they're super suppressed, definitely look into emotional intelligence, emotional regulation skills for sure.
And I guess one other side part too that you've been through too is, can you speak on emotional abuse and just what that is and what that looks like? Most people don't know. I would say most people think abuse is hitting, touching. And I would say even verbal abuse is easily identified in most cases.
Yeah.
You know, language, volume, the way that somebody's spoken to, you can identify that. But emotional abuse, like what would you speak on to that?
Yeah, it's essentially how somebody makes you feel, and how, not just how they make you feel, but how they make you feel about yourself. So for me, it was a lot of like just putting down my abilities, even though I was like a very capable woman. I walked around every day feeling like I was so insignificant and that I wasn't able to do anything. And so when you start to feel certain ways about yourself, or your self-esteem is always like attacked, that's pretty much a sign that you're in some type of emotional abuse. And that can be too like parental. I think that's pretty common, is, you know, when your parents put you down a lot, and that can come from verbal, that becomes emotional abuse depending on the words that are said. So yeah, I think that when it comes to emotional abuse, there's different forms of it, for sure. But I think the easiest way to recognize it is when it's an attack on your own self-esteem and your own self-worth.
And it can be so hard because, excuse me, you start to believe that, and then you start to think that you deserve that.
Correct.
And that this is truth. So of course this person is saying this to me. And then it's so much harder to identify in that moment because you're already in that emotional pit.
Yeah, and because it becomes your own belief. So when it seeps into your own belief system, then you're also like abusing yourself with your own like thoughts. And so it's really important to, but it's hard to catch that. But so the one thing I tell people all the time is just start catching your own thoughts, like observing what you're saying to yourself, and make a note in your phone and start to just write things down. Because years later, I was writing down things like, even I would send an email and be like, oh, I forgot to attach the thing I said I was going to attach. Like, oh, Michaela, you're such an idiot. And there was one day when I started catching my thoughts, I more times than I can count on my fingers and toes, I wrote down that I was dumb or stupid, which all stems back to from everything I was told in my marriage. And so I had to learn how to catch my thought. And then I go through a process. It's called cognitive restructuring, but I call it savvy thinking. And the savvy, you catch your thought, you write down the situation, like who, what, when, where. The cognitive, you can Google it. There's a thought loop log in there. But like you write down the situation that occurred. Then you write down how you feel. You feel less than? Do you feel like whatever it is that you feel, sadness, anxious? And then you write the evidence to support that thought, the evidence that does not support that thought. And then you write a new thought. And then write it like, what mood would you have if you started thinking this new thought? How would that make you feel? So I was always having to catch my thought and be like, no, you're a smart, capable, intelligent woman. And so I literally would have to say that to myself all the time until that new thought became a part of my belief system. It takes a little bit of time though. It really does.
And knowledge, just that process of learning. And then you're not going to get it right the first time when you write down a thought. So it's learning and redoing and restructuring. And I think that is different than even what you grew up like, oh, just think positive. Because you can think, oh, it's great. But it's actually retraining your brain on a thought versus suppressing the thought and just trying to
replace it,
put a Band-Aid on it with something positive. It's like, no, this is actually what I'm taking that thought and changing it. And rewiring your brain.
Because it needs evidence. Your brain is always looking for evidence of things. So if you're saying like, I'm so stupid, it's going to search for evidence of that. And so that's the important part of like writing down the evidence that does not support that thought that you're thinking, so that it's training your brain to adopt that new way of thinking. So yeah, there's like a whole, I find all of that stuff to be so
it's very interesting.
So interesting. I would love to get my degree in it and maybe develop a college.
Please do.
It's true. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't want to go into because emotions are scary.
Mm-hmm.
They hurt and
Yeah.
you can hit so many peaks and pits that we
Yeah.
talk about. Like hitting those highs are so great. And then those lows are so low, and knowing how to regulate them, why they're there, all of that. And that's really, really hard work. It's harder than going to the gym and being physically fit.
1,000%.
It takes so much more brain power. And I remember my therapist telling me the one day, she's like, Mandy, you're going through so much you're working through so many things emotionally that it's okay if you're exhausted.
Yes.
And she was like, you can be tired and take a nap. You might not be physically tired, but your brain is working through this process.
Yes.
And emotionally, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And knowing even when you hit that wall of I am done, I cannot take another person. I cannot take another incident. I'm going to turn my phone on, do not disturb, and I'm going to be still and quiet. I need that time to refresh and reset.
Yep. You absolutely do. You know, LeBron takes like 3-hour naps every day. Most people don't know that.
Yeah. He can afford it too.
That's true. It's paid the whole time.
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
I do. I really enjoy studying people like athletes and people who are super successful because I'm like, what do they all have?
Yeah. How can I take even just a little piece of something that you do
Yeah.
and make it work for myself and for other people?
Yeah, for sure. But a lot of them have coaches in lots of different areas. And I'm sure we're going to hear something. What is that?
Sounds like road work.
It's a car.
Oh, is it? Oh, wow. Needs a little. I think it needs to go to the
Old car needs
the
to go to the
doctor.
mechanic. Sorry,
Go to the doctor.
That's true.
There's a therapy joke in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Preventative maintenance.
For sure.
Oh my gosh.
As we wrap up, which there's so much good stuff. If you could, this might be a hard question. If you could give a one-liner or like one statement to somebody in their 20s or early 20s, kind of as your focus of, and obviously this applies to everybody, but just with that thought in mind, like what would you tell that person? Like what would you tell Michaela at 21?
So many things, which is why I'm writing a book about it all. I would tell her that she's okay and that there's no rush. I would tell her that her instincts are really good and to like learn how to trust herself. And for the love of God, read a finance book. That's what I would tell.
Go back to school, Finance 101.
Yeah. Like learn about investments and all that stuff. But yeah, no, that she's okay. And that there is no rush. That's probably the biggest thing. I feel like we rush through so many things. The season of life that you're in is the one that you're supposed to be in. And until you learn the lessons that you're supposed to learn, it's not even good for you to move on. So embrace it. And like, if I could say one sentence, it would be own your now. Just like own and embrace exactly where you are right now. Because you can learn everything that you need to learn for whatever is next.
Yeah.
And if you don't take that pause, it's impossible to hear your gut, let alone listen to it.
100%.
Yeah.
It's like your 10-hour car ride. Some people just need 10 hours with themselves to listen. Like, but don't be so scared, because I used to think to myself, I'm scared to go up there. Because like, who knows what's going on in the space in between your ears. But like, maybe don't go there just by yourself. You can also go there with somebody if it scares you that much. Whether it's a therapist or a coach or take a workshop. Like, there are so many courses out there right now that you could take that aren't that expensive.
On basic things, finance.
Basic, yes.
How to heal, how to trust yourself, how to meditate, how to journal. I'm sure there's courses on journaling.
Oh my gosh.
YouTube it.
So, yeah, for sure. You could totally YouTube it.
Or there's planned journals that have prompts in them too. So.
I have an entire module in the Savvy Single about finances.
So important.
So important.
Yeah.
So you mentioned today is day one of Pieces of Peace. What is the next big project? You talked about liking to compartmentalize projects and be done with them. So once Pieces of Peace is done, or at least this cycle, what's the next thing down the pipeline that we can look for?
Yeah, so I do small rounds of the Savvy, which will become the Savvy Journey. So I only take I open enrollment for a short amount of time, like a week, and then we close it. We keep it really small and intimate because I coach the women through that, and it's 6 to 8 weeks is that program. So that'll open up for the fall, going into the new year. And then this new year is a lot of, we're developing the men's version of some things, and the speaking side of my business is going to be doing a lot more, just to kind of get the word out about the current programs that I have. And I'm refilming a few things, but every quarter, every season, I come out with a new workshop because I love creating them. I like creating the workbooks that go along with them. And because the Savvy is higher price point, I like to do things like the Pieces of Peace is $57. It goes up to $300 after it's over. But I like to make them $57. I just literally, I think I said on Instagram the other day, avoid half an aisle of Target. You can pay for that.
One night out.
Yeah, literally. It's crazy. Just for you, not even if you go out with someone else. My gosh.
And again, we've talked about this before in our podcast. You can find one nugget. It could just be one day or one piece that could change your life. No pun intended. But it could be just one thing of a whole course that can do it, and that you might need to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So how can people find you?
Yeah, mostly on Instagram is where I'm at. It's at Michaela Belle. So my name is spelled Michael with an A, and then Belle is Belle with an E at the end.
We can put that in the show notes too.
Yeah. So I'm mostly on there. And then all the workshops too that I've done in the past are also still available too. So if there's something that someone's interested in, it's probably on my website, michaelabelle.co.
Great.
And we'll share all that in notes and everything, so people don't have to wonder, wait, go back. Michaela with a what? Michaela with an E? Bella with an A?
Is her name Michael?
I know. I get the craziest, Michela, at Starbucks.
Michela.
What?
I was
just I get the most. Michela. I'm what?
I don't know why that just tickled me so much.
I was talking to somebody that when you order on the app, it obviously uses your name.
Yeah.
But I was talking to somebody the other day who had a really difficult name, and they said they always just give John. That's it. And so they're yeah, just say John, and then they'll be like, John? Oh, great, that's mine. And then their friends are like, what? That's not your name.
Yeah.
Well,
it's easier for them.
It's too complicated if you try to actually spell it out and let me take the time.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's interesting.
Oh my gosh. So before we close, we always ask our guests if they can share a song, or some people have been sharing 2 and 3 songs, but if there's a song that was either really meaningful to you in a difficult point in your life, a song that's really resonating to you right now, or a song that just always speaks to you. Exactly. We'd love to add it to our playlist. We have the most eclectic Rocky Road playlist on Spotify right now. It is off the wall, but it's really great because
anything from Backstreet Boys to Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah, there's worship music. There's Five Finger Death Punch. There's folk. It's literally all over the place. Yeah. So, what is a song that really, really speaks to you?
Well, right now, and you guys will probably be shocked, but the song is called Peace, by Anna. What's her last name? Gold. Oh my gosh, what is her last name? Golden.
We'll look it up. We can find it.
Yeah, Anna Golden.
Anna Golden. Yeah, I love her. Her voice is so good. But in that song, it's just talking about having peace in the storm, having peace in the valley. So, you guys know that I'm into the peace thing right now. So yeah, that would be my song.
Awesome.
She's got so many good ones on there, and even the new one that she has is really pretty.
I'm not familiar with her, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we get to look it up. We learn new music too, which is great.
I love it.
Yeah. So you can check out our playlist at the Rocky Road playlist on Spotify.
I love that. I'm going to check that out.
And it's wild.
It's hilarious.
Let me tell you.
Listen to it on shuffle. You'll be very shocked.
Yeah. Honestly, you can listen to it straight through and you'll still be equally shocked.
Oh Oh my gosh, that's a beautiful idea. I love that so much.
It's kind of fun too to see, like, we know what songs belong to each person.
Yeah.
But looking at the episodes, and if people don't know, like one of my favorites, for example, was a woman we had, and hers is the 5-finger death punch that it's like a little E next to it. And I'm like, I would not expect this song out of you. And she's like, oh yeah, it's great. It's just interesting.
Oh my gosh. What somebody listens to says a lot about them. And I'm so all over the place with my music. You know, it's like I go from that to like Jay-Z.
Exactly. But we have that because a song tells a story. And as music therapists for the two of us, we know the meaning of music and how important it is behind everything that we do. And so we just ask that question, and it's like we have Hotel California on there. And also we put them on as we interview. So they're like previews. So like we'll put yours on today when we're interviewing you, and then people can like listen, but they don't know whose it is yet. And so it doesn't, you know, so they can kind of check it out. So it's just a fun thing.
I love that. But thanks for having me, you guys.
Thanks for hanging out with us. And it's amazing. There's so much. Probably listen to this episode 2 or 3 times to catch everything, I guess. But yeah. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Really excited to see what happens with your course material. I love like seeing your little blurb on Instagram. So I just, it helps you feel connected. So I hope everyone who's here listening, follow Michaela. She's great. And she shares some sassy opinions sometimes too, which is always appreciated.
For sure. Definitely. I got some sass in me.
And it's also fun just seeing your personal journey too. And like Malin growing up and everything. Too.
Oh my gosh.
And now with Ryan, it's cool to just, you haven't met him, but you feel like you kind of know him. So it's cool. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah. We'll catch you all down the road.
See you later.
Bye, guys.